I'm talking today about extremes and their influence on intelligence and creativity. So you all know about those really smart people in our history who, they're just geniuses, apparently right from the start. Albert Einstein comes to mind, and then, of course, one of my inspirers, Elon Musk. Now, the classical way of looking at these minds is that, there you go, mental silver spoon, instant prodigy from birth, genius just given to you on a platter, genetic bequeathment, that's it, there you go. Some of these people are just special and you're not. Well, Einstein and Musk fall somewhat on a spectrum of autism. I mean, for instance, young Albert was pretty much very bookish, and he actually failed at a lot of things at school, and his own interests had a very narrow range of interests, and what he did like, he kind of just obsessed himself with. And one of the things that happened with him as a natural course of his behavior is that he'd preoccupy himself for hours in what he referred to as daydreams, and what has also been talked about as thought experiments. So we all know that Einstein ended up, being one of the greatest physics geniuses of the last century, and that's well documented that he had some fantastic achievements, particularly in the early 1900s. But the thing that's very interesting is that after he donated his brain to science, they've got it in a cabinet somewhere, and they noticed that a certain portion of part of his brain was just overly enlarged. And that's something that interests me because I've read about something called neuroplasticity, where the brain potentially can rewire itself. And one wonders if, because Einstein was so ensconced in his thoughts for such prolonged periods of time, that a portion of his brain grew larger just as directly as a result of it. I mean, did he get smarter as a result of just his behavior? Now you can look at Elon Musk too. I mean, in his situation, he was subject to some extremes. He had violence from his father, and he had a violence in his school. He was bullied, and he was way more on that autistic kind of spectrum, and he very much kept to himself. And then he relates how in his teenage years he was really into trying to understand philosophy because he had, quote, an existential crisis. I guess he was trying to find meaning. I mean, if you had the crap beaten out of you by humans for a lot of your life, wouldn't you try to find meaning out of life? So, I mean, he read almost libraries of philosophy, this guy, amongst all the other things he's capable of doing. But he's now just one of the manufacturing and aerospatial and automobile geniuses of this century. And again, one wonders if somewhat behavior, in his case under duress, might have kicked this off, and then perhaps there's not so much of a genetic silver spoon component to this as one would think. This is where I'm leading to. There is another path that I've contemplated that might be possible for enhanced intelligence and creativity, and that's a road less traveled. And I've thought about it with myself. Now, I'm not saying I'm a genius, I'm not saying I'm super smart. I just wonder, over time, have certain of my faculties just got a lot better. And to me, this is like the road less traveled to those improvements. So let me kind of relate and put this together, okay? When I was a kid and I was between situations, I was after a community college down there in Australia, in Tasmania, and I was off work from serving in my father's bar, and I was on the other side of the counter. I had a lot of ideas about what I wanted to be in life, and I had bought this ornate little stylus and paper and pad, opened it up with its leather-bound case, and sat there at the counter and thought for a while. I really wanted to be a writer at that point, for that small period of time. And I thought about a little story, thought about the broad scope of it, and I sat there for a couple of hours, and I'm not even sure if I even got half a page down. I barely recall like how many minuscule sentences were actually put to paper. And that was it. You know, as a very late teen, I wasn't going to be a writer that day. Fast forward 40-something years, and in the space of a calendar month, a couple of months ago, I put down a story about a section of my life that occurred 20 years ago. Wrote a book, wrote a novel. In that frame of time, just poured it out. Sheer cathartic, emptied it out like it was water, like it was nothing. I had, prior to that, thought about writing for a number of years and shown some movement toward it. But this is really the Rubicon that I crossed, where it just popped right out. And I kind of amazed myself, because I thought this is a nexus of where I've come probably in the last 20 years. And a kid of 19-year-old can't write a story, but a guy of 63-year-old is filled up. That story, the experience of life, is within him, just wanting to come out. So let me try to get to the next point of that. Yeah, the evolution of it over the preceding dozen or so years. I want to talk about this road less traveled. And what we're talking about is extremes of duress, prolonged extremes of duress, driving a tendency towards increasing intelligence, smartness, if you will. And I know my channel has that terminology in it, but it also has, for me, a kind of a frustration with the flip side of that. If I am so smart, then why can't I ... That's the frustration. So it's extremes of prolonged duress, it's a big word for some people, driving somewhat of a tendency toward increased intelligence and more so creativity. So I went through such periods in the last decade and a half where I was literally in such dire circumstances, and the word a number of people will be familiar with, deprivation, sheer, absolute and utter deprivation. That my brain was just reaching, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? I mean, you talk about necessity being the mother of invention. Maybe necessity is the mother of the improvement of the mind. I mean, I had to get creative in a number of circumstances, but really it was the reaching. It was the hoping, it was the wishing, it was the begging. I remember many times with a friend of mine, I wrote multiple pages of pleading letters. Please, please, if I can just get a little bit of help for this and that, I'll show you what I can do. And I did get some help from my friend, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Will always be eternally grateful for the assistance I'd received. But his comments to me were, if we're being English correct, his comments to me were, wow. I mean, some of the words he used were like very ornate phrases, flowery, and he even mentioned some of the things, the way you like pulling me with your emotions are a little like Jack London. And I didn't even know who that guy was. Sorry to be a bit of an ignoramus at the time, but I didn't know who he was. A few short years later, long story short, studied at the college here in the Central Valley. Creative writing class, one of the last classes I was able to do, was assigned reading Jack London's To Build a Fire, which is it's a stone kind of cold, ripping story that just leaves you with, oh my God, you know? And then I wrote back and I asked my friend, was that what you were talking about? London's To Build the Fire? And like, he kind of pretty much said yes. Now, I don't want to liken myself to any kind of great, because I feel like, let's be, what is the word? Let's be both grandiose and humble at the same time. I feel myself to be a writer, but I feel myself to be a writer that's yet to really begin to come into his own. I wrote a book. I've started a channel. I feel like one of the reasons I started the channel is because I wanted to show that I feel within me, and this is what my friend was talking about at one point, that I have a voice that's just trying to get out. His idea on that was pay it forward, you know. His assistance to me would eventually be, maybe I could help some people. And if you're searching for purpose and meaning in this life, and I'm not a religious person. I am not. I have people who are very religious, and I interact with my friends on that level with absolute and utter respect. You know, there's a tolerance on either side. But if you are a religious person, then you're looking at, okay, let's rephrase the paraphrase. Do unto others as you had done for you. So if this is it, if this is my voice, and it's a voice that's still kind of growing and flowering, and I am a writer, but you all just don't know it yet. It's like, you know, quartz, lodestone, very rough, unpolished. You can't quite see the glinting of the gold nugget seams within it yet. But, you know, polish her up, give it a little bit more editing. Bam, there you go. there's something that pulls you into it. So I got multiple streams of thought now. I'm trying to coalesce all of them together. But one of them is the road less traveled, deprivation, particularly extreme prolonged periods of duress, stress, where the mind, the brain, the soul, the spirit is just reaching. That can open up I believe that can open up the neuroplasticity of the mind so that the brain can rewire and add and build and create something within yourself that's more and larger than what you were before. And that, I guess, is probably a journey too. So if I could stop having all these damn cars driving past me, I could retain my line of thought. My line of thought is, it's not just the intelligence or smartness, if you will, increasing, but it's the creativity. Because whereas I couldn't write a stitch when I was a kid, now I can bounce out 48,000 words in a lunar month, just like that. That's the story that was written before the 3 other stories I wanted to write about the period of deprivation, which would describe where I got to this point. To him, my friend, the most important story. And that story would also really characterize how that deprivation has led, those prolonged periods of duress has developed into a smarter, more creative mind, if you will. I'm trying to be humble about this without being grandiose. Because I'm really a small, tiny ant on a huge, giant blue marble. I mean, that's still really all I am. But if anything, I wanted people to get out of this is 2 things. Is one, that the world around you can radically change you, and your response to it can be, going from a thorn to a flower, if you will. And also, and I think I've lost the second part of it, what I was going to say. Oh yeah, about the voice. That what goes in can come out in radically different ways. That can make you a voice for certain things. And I guess that's probably the last part of what I wanted to say, is that I'm hoping. I'm not really sure how much longer I've got. I mean, I'm going through another period like that, and I'm reaching. And as I said in earlier videos, there's that complete lack of connectivity. But I guess I'm thinking, wow, again, the legacy, is there going to be a legacy or anything? Can I start this process of putting a voice out there that has something really to say that ultimately could help people? There you go. That's it for tonight.